So you're watching this video because you've had depersonalization symptoms for many months or even many years, and no matter what you've tried, nothing seems to get better. And when you look online, you see the same advice repeated over and over again, which is it's just from anxiety, it's just from stress, you just have to remove the stress, reduce the anxiety, and then the depersonalization symptoms will go away eventually. But here's the problem. You're not experiencing stress or anxiety anymore, and yet you still have depersonalization symptoms. And maybe you've been like this for a long time and you're thinking, what's going on? Is there something wrong with me? Am I unique and that this is just never going to go away because I've done what they told me to do and it's still here? See, I had depersonalization disorder for 10 years and I was able to recover with no medication at all. And during that period of time, yeah, a lot of it was very stressful and I was very anxious for a lot of it. But there was a point where that started to go away, and there were periods of time when there was no stress and no anxiety. And that was very confusing because I still had depersonalization symptoms. And this is what I think people miss out when it comes to depersonalization recovery. Most of the advice applies to people who have the anxiety and stress. So in this video, I'm going to show you why you have depersonalization symptoms but no anxiety and no stress. So at some point in the past you were experiencing anxiety and stress, and so you can understand why you had depersonalization symptoms. You looked online and they told you what you understand, which is when you have too much anxiety and stress, for some people this becomes overwhelming, which is natural. So the natural response is dissociation, so depersonalization symptoms. Then at some point you stopped experiencing anxiety and stress, and you might be thinking, oh, does this mean I'm getting better? But then if I'm getting better, why am I still having these symptoms of depersonalization? But here's the thing, this doesn't necessarily mean that you are getting better. What it means is that your body and mind are in a very particular state, and that's what I'm going to go into today, because I believe that this is what so much of the depersonalization advice is completely missing. And once you understand this, it will change everything for you and how you approach your recovery. And this is because that feeling of not feeling stress and anxiety, and that feeling of maybe not really feeling anything at all, that's actually a clue to what's going on. Because you might have been told that, oh, depersonalization, just a mind thing, just an anxiety thing. There is more going on. It's a mind and body experience. And this is occurring through your nervous system. So to give you the answer as to what's going on, I'm going to introduce you to Polyvagal theory. And this was created by the neuroscientist Dr. Stephen Porges in the mid-90s. Some of this you'll be able to understand immediately because I am going to talk about things you're familiar with. But then I'm going to present it in a different way, which is going to give you the big understanding that you're looking for. So the first thing to understand is polyvagal theory does acknowledge that there is the fight, flight, and the freeze response. So what I'm sure you already understand, but if not, I'll go through it now. When someone experiences too much stress and too much anxiety for long periods of time, so they're in the fight, flight response in their nervous system, specifically their sympathetic nervous system. When this goes on for too long, it's going to become overwhelming for the body and mind. That's natural. So the body and mind create this protection, which is dissociation, and that can appear as depersonalization symptoms, and that's part of the freeze response. So you can think of it as the fight and flight is like the acceleration on your body, on your nervous system and your mind. This is when it creates high amounts of energy in your nervous system because it wants to mobilize you to either run away from a perceived threat or to fight a perceived threat. If you are in this state for too long, for weeks, for months, maybe even years for some people, your body cannot be in this state for that long. It's not meant to be. This is only meant to be a temporary state to get you to safety. So the freeze response comes in like the brake pedal. So it puts the brakes. So what it's doing is you're in high energy. So now it starts to create low energy. So what it does is it creates hypoarousal instead of hyperarousal. So with depersonalization, your body and mind have the acceleration going at full blast with the anxiety, the stress, the panic, but at the same time, we're trying to slow it down. And it's putting the brakes on, trying to create the freeze response. So the way I see it, depersonalization, while yes, people say it's the freeze response, really when you think about it, it's both. It's the fight, flight, and the freeze response at the same time. So imagine a car that has the acceleration going and at the same time the brakes. You're probably familiar with this, but that's the traditional way of looking at depersonalization, because that's depersonalization with the anxiety and the stress. The next thing to understand is your window of tolerance. So this was an idea coined by Dr. Dan Siegel. The window of tolerance is the range that your nervous system can handle pressure and stress and activation, or you could say arousal, so that it's still able to function normally without going into the fight, flight, or freeze response. So this is where you experience what is normally called rest and digest, but that's normally where you experience the feeling of safety, you're able to easily socialize, you feel present in the moment, you feel connected, you feel calm. So this is the optimal range that people can do everyday tasks normally without any kind of disruption, or what is sometimes referred to as dysregulation in the emotions. The key to understanding depersonalization disorder, and to be honest, I think probably many other mental health issues, is when you're experiencing high level stress and anxiety, you're not only outside of your window of tolerance for so long, but over time, you end up gradually, little by little, developing a more sensitive nervous system because it's an adaptation to the constant threats that are being perceived by your body and mind. So what that means is you start out with a wide window of tolerance, but imagine if, let's say, in childhood or later years, you experience frequent stress, frequent anxiety. Your body and mind will adapt and your nervous system's window of tolerance will shrink. People with depersonalization disorder or other anxiety-related disorders, what's happening is their window of tolerance is smaller. So it's more like this. So imagine like this is the limit. This is like the range. There's a much smaller range like this that they can be in. So that means they're always out of the window of tolerance, or most of the time they're out of it. You can think of it like, imagine you have a car and you have the car alarm, but imagine it kept getting broken into frequently. So imagine then the alarm has an intelligent system that goes, okay, we've been broken into so many times, we are going to up the sensitivity. So each time there was an issue like that, the sensitivity of the alarm kept going up and up and up. You're going to get to a point where, somebody walks by, the alarm goes off. The wind blows, an alarm goes off. A leaf lands on it, the alarm goes off. It's way too sensitive because of past experiences. So the reason why you have depersonalization symptoms but no stress and anxiety is because not only do you have a smaller window of tolerance because of a sensitized nervous system from the prolonged stress and anxiety, this is what was happening. So as arousal increased in your nervous system, so imagine this is the amount of stress that's going up. Oh, now you're out of your window of tolerance. Or maybe you had a normal window of tolerance. So maybe it wasn't from childhood that you had a sensitive nervous system. Maybe it's from in adulthood. So now you're out of your window of tolerance, and you've been out of your window of tolerance for so long. This is the first stage of depersonalization, where you have the fight, flight, freeze response at the same time. But there comes a point where there's no more fuel left to keep the acceleration going. So then you go into shutdown. So now only the brakes are on, and now you experience the shutdown response. So what that means is, in polyvagal theory, there are three main states. You have the sympathetic state, the ventral vagal state, which is parasympathetic response, that's rest and digest. But this is the key to understanding the depersonalization with no anxiety and stress. You are in what's known as the dorsal vagal shutdown state. So this is the final protective mechanism that's at the end of depersonalization when you've had way too much stress and been in depersonalization for too long. This is what can happen when you've had depersonalization so intensely that now even the anxiety has to be shut down as a way to conserve energy. So it's a way for your body and mind to protect you. Think of it like a phone that's low on battery. Let's say it's been running so many high level processes for so long and it hasn't been able to recharge. It gets to 2% battery and it goes, okay, we need to put on ultra power saving mode. So imagine before it was at 5% and your battery was on just power saving mode. So it could still do most things, but it was slowing it down. So you couldn't use the phone that well, but you could do basic things. Think of that like the first stage of depersonalization with both the acceleration and the brake on at the same time. So it's doing some things, but it's also starting to slow things down. But when it gets to that 2%, 1% battery, it goes, okay, now we really have to conserve energy. So what happens? If you ever put your phone in ultra power saving mode, what does it do? It completely minimizes and only keeps the most basic functions, right? So you can't, let's say, use the internet. You can't use most apps. You can only do maybe texts and calls. It turns into like a dumb phone, right? This is kind of what's happening. So your nervous system will shut down your emotions. And this is then why you feel, well, I don't feel stressed. I don't feel anxious. I don't really feel anything at all. So you're probably feeling more numbness. That's what's going on. You're in dorsal vagal shutdown. And this leads on to the next biggest problem. And this is where traditional depersonalization advice fails, because they are focused on reducing arousal, which for many people is actually the right thing to do, because there's way too much high energy in the nervous system. There's way too much arousal going on. They do need to bring it back down into their window of tolerance. But is opposite for you, right? So if you're watching this video because you have no stress and anxiety but depersonalization symptoms, there are really a few things going on here. So you don't need less arousal, you need more arousal, because you're hypo-aroused, you're in a shutdown state, you're in a low energy state, so your nervous system is in like low power mode. And you're probably wondering, why have I put these other experiences here? And that's because while you're not maybe experiencing anxiety and stress, you may notice that when you're in dorsal vagal shutdown, you do experience some emotions, but it's more likely things like depression or the feeling of wanting to withdraw from people. Maybe you'll feel exhausted. Maybe you feel hopeless. Maybe you feel shame. This is part of your body and mind trying to protect you. I know it sounds weird, but think about it. If you want to withdraw from people, that's like a form of protection. If you feel shame, shame makes you not want to be around people. That's like a form of protection, right? And that feeling of exhaustion is, again, a way to protect you. So that, because it's all of the energy levels going down, that's why you feel tired. It's purposefully keeping energy levels low. So what you need is not high amounts of activation, you need gentle activation. Because if you try and, let's say, if you try and go for a run, when you're in this state, you're increasing the arousal so much that it's just going to keep you in the shutdown response. So what you need is gentle activation of the nervous system. So what does that mean for you? It means you're not broken. There isn't anything wrong with you. I say this in my other videos. Your mind and body are doing what they can to protect you. So the first level of protection was the traditional depersonalization symptoms with the anxiety and stress. And then the second level of protection, that further amount of protection, is dorsal vagal shutdown. And that's why you experience depersonalization symptoms, but no anxiety and no stress. So you're probably thinking, okay, so how do I get out of that? So in the next video, I'm going to show you the various things you can do to shift out of dorsal vagal shutdown and into the ventral vagal state, which is within your window of tolerance. And I understand that that was probably a lot to take in. And I remember that when you have depersonalization, memory and concentration can be difficult, right? You maybe haven't remembered or have focused on what I was saying. That's okay, because what I've done is I've created a one-page PDF guide that's completely free for you to download, and it summarizes everything that was in this video, so you can always refer back to it if you couldn't remember something. So to get that free PDF, check the link in the pinned comment and in the description below. So if you are ready to start recovering from depersonalization disorder, as well as the other mental health issues I talk about on this channel, like maladaptive daydreaming, anxiety, depression, and digital addictions, I now do one-on-one coaching where I work with people to help them to start recovering from these issues. Check the link for my website in the pinned comment and the description below, and we can book a one-on-one clarity call where we can discuss what you're currently going through and we can see if we're a good fit to work together. Also, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe button so that you can be notified when I release the next video. And let me know in the comments, what's the main thing that you've learned from this video that has changed the way you see depersonalization disorder and related symptoms. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.